Many of you walked into the room assuming that English or French or Arabic or Italian or Hindi is your first language. I would argue, especially knowing the room here, the way I'm getting to know you, most of us have the first language of problem solving, which means that we're pretty good at getting people to move forward. We're pretty good at getting to yes. And that's a good thing. That first language of problem solving serves you well when you're dealing with problems. You know, I can think of lots of situations at the homeless shelter where I'd say, hey, that's not safe, this is safe. Or this is our guideline, you got to come on this side. The challenge, though, is that when I'm using this first kind of problem-solving language, but I'm trying to navigate a tension, situation that's not right and wrong, but right and right. But I'm using problem-solving either-or language, and inevitably you end up in what's called a tug-of-war conversation. And if you haven't been in a tug-of-war for a while, might be a nice epic outing for us one day, but for now, I'll just explain. The only goal is to get people on that side to my side. And if you resist, I pull harder, because I can't lose. And again, if you're dealing with a problem that's right and wrong, go for it. But if you're trying to navigate a tension, this actually will just continually polarize the conversation. We've got to have a different kind of conversation. I had an experience of this years ago. I remember I was in the homeless shelter. I walked, it was the beginning of my shift. I walked into the boardroom. There's 4 or 5 people there, some coaches and some managers, and clearly it was a tug-of-war conversation. I learned that there was a young woman staying in this shelter who had used a substance on property that was outside of our guidelines. And generally at that stage, going back in time, if you use drugs or alcohol on property, there'd be a short-term suspension. We wouldn't just kind of kick you out, but you'd generally be taken to a detox facility or to another shelter. Now, if you talk to my managers who have a consistency bias, they're generally saying there's no conversation to have. This is our guidelines. This is what we've done. It's the safest thing for her. It's the best thing for our community. She can't stay. Made complete sense until you talk to our coaches, specifically the coach of the young woman, who said, okay, time out. This young woman has been doing incredible over the last month, and you may not all know this, but in the next day, 24 hours from now, she's going to go to treatment, which is super hard to get access to right now. And here's the thing. We've been at this work long enough to know when someone's about to take that step, they sometimes do what we refer to as self-sabotage. They just make a very bad decision right before. We know that. And if we have her suspended, she's not going to treatment. We'll probably never see her again. So what's the fair thing to do? And it went back and forth until it was actually quite powerful. There was a relatively new staff member who had the courage to say, folks, I feel like this young woman deserves a better conversation than we're having. And we just pause for a moment. And it took us back to some things that we knew. I train on this, and yet you can lose in the heat of the moment. Just some basic guidelines. One is recognizing if we're dealing with a tension, there's actually always wisdom and resistance. Always. I don't need to agree with you to learn from you. In fact, if all I do is hang out with people who I agree with, my learning tanks. I learn from folks who are going to push me or going to allow me to see things from a perspective that I won't see otherwise. So, and I know even personally, I've written 4 books on this. When I'm sensing defensiveness, when I'm sensing polarization, the voice in my head is there's wisdom and resistance. You talked about your friend, Dr. Wells, that you had lunch with. There's wisdom and resistance. I don't need to agree, but there's something that I can learn. You know, the second thing is we've got to be able to elevate this conversation out of positions, because positions generally meant she stays, she goes. But at an interest level, it was different. You know, you had the coach say to the managers, you're saying that she's suspended. That is not our position at all. What's the interest behind it? You know, and you had managers saying, I got a few. One gentleman said, like, I've suspended a few people in the last week. They're going to come back here. How am I going to look them in the eye and not do it here? And beyond that, we really try to keep our kind of culture safe and clean, and we're not doing well right now. And this decision, I think, is going to signal whether we're good with that or not. And I just want this place to be a refuge from the streets. Well, every coach in the room said, well, we want that too. You had a manager saying, okay, but you're saying that she stays, which is definitely not our position. What's the interest behind it? You had the coach of the young woman say, I've just got one. I just want her to get to treatment. Well, every manager in the room said, well, we want that too. And what was fascinating is I'm going to argue probably in 5 minutes of a different kind of conversation. We went from believing that you and I have nothing in common, zero common ground, to recognizing we want almost all of the same things. Definitely coming at it from a different place, but most of our higher values are consistent.